Hello, this is Dina Toledo, and this is my assignment number 6, Facilitating Creativity and Innovation. This is my student choice board. One of the things that I do in my class, and I'm a sixth grade ELA teacher in the resource room. One of the things that I do is I love doing a lot of novel studies. I try to make sure that the content that I'm providing for my students is accessible, even though majority of them are reading several grades behind level. At the sixth grade level this year, I have several students who are at a kindergarten or first grade level. But even though they're at that level, I still have to expose them to higher level texts so that they are ready for the next grade level and to take the standardized test at the end of the year. For this choice board, um, the students, it's broken into two parts. The first part is the reading part, and then the second part at the bottom is the assignment part. So at the top, the students, and this is for 1 week, they would get this choice board. And usually novel study sections run for about 30 minutes a rotation, and I have an 80-minute block. So it's two 80-minute rotations and then 20 minutes of another lesson at the beginning of class. So basically, what the students are going to do, they're going to choose 4 options from the section below to complete by the end of the week, and they will be choosing how they're reading a story with their group. They're going to talk with the people in their group at the beginning of the week, and the reason they are doing that is because they are learning together with the group. Because they are learning together with the group. Now, there are 5 activities, and the first 2 activities are reading aloud with a partner or reading aloud with the group. Every week on Friday, we always do a whole group novel study lesson together where the entire class reads. So the kids know what the expectation is for whole group reading aloud. Now, for the most part, our groups are no more than 5 students in the small group section because the class is broken into 2 groups. And my classes max out at 9. So they can do a partner read aloud activity. If the students are in a group of 5, they can easily do that in um, a group of 3 and a group of 2. Then there's the whole group where the kids will be reading together with their peers. All of the books that I give my students, I've pre-recorded all of the texts. So my students could do a whole group listen where I've also provided headphone splitters that they could put in one device. The students have their own earbuds and they would attach their earbuds to the headphone splitter. And as they are listening to the book, they're following the book. They're following the text in their physical novel. They can do the same thing with a partner listen, or then they can choose independent listen. In this last column, they would put what day they completed that type of reading. Now, by doing this, I'm assuring that the kids are reading aloud at least once. This is going to help them practice their fluency. The only way they're going to be able to practice is by actually doing that. And they're also going to have to collaborate with their peers, which is what I love about having the students select how they are going to read the text. They have to talk with the people in their group. And some days, let's face it, the kids in sixth grade, they have their moody days. There are days where they don't want to talk to anybody. So this gives them that chance of having at least one independent day during the week if they choose that. On the other hand, some of them don't want to do things independently. They only want to do things as a group. This allows them to do that also, but also giving them the support of listening to a fluent reader. Majority of the students in my class this year are close to fluent. My caseload so far this year is 17 students, and out of those 17, 4 are close to reading fluently on level. So this is how they are going to read in the very beginning of their novel study time. And then in this final column for this section on the right, they're going to put what date they completed that assignment. Again, they're going to get one of these every week, and that's that. So let's say Johnny completed whole group read aloud on 11/9, then he would put 11/9 in this box. And then if he decided to do partner listen on 11/10, he would put 11/10 in this box. So there should be 4 dates in here by the time the week is over. Then the next section is where the creativity and the innovation and all of that comes in. So this is the show your work section. After you read, complete one of the assignments. You're going to complete one of the assignments below. The idea is to complete 4 assignments in a week. All of my students have extended time for assignments built into their IEPs. If students need more time, that's fine. I'm not going to tell them ahead of time that they're going to have extra time, but because of the way things are built into their schedule and their IEPs, they will have extra time to complete some of these assignments. Some of these assignments, they won't even need 15 to 20 minutes to complete. They can do it very quickly, depending on how long it takes them to read or listen to the text. So in this first column, we have writing assignments, and the goal for the week is to have at least 2 writing assignments done. That way the students can then pick one from collaboration and one from the create column. So for the writing section, the students have, I'll make it a little bit bigger. They can choose to write an objective summary. That is one of the big skills that we go over in 6th grade, is how to write an objective summary. And there's an assignment linked here so that the students they have an example of what the sentence starter for objective summaries, and then an actual example of an objective summary. We go over all of that several times throughout the year before the kids I'm giving them the tools to just do it by themselves. And for this, they're writing an objective summary about the chapter or chapters, depending on how long the text is. And I want them, again, to use the sentence starter. Their actual final product for this, they can either write their answers on notes using their Logitech crayons. Our district is 1-to-1 with iPads. I'm one of the lucky teachers that actually has a class set of Logitech crayons. Logitech crayon is simply a more kid-friendly version of an Apple Pencil, and that's our district purchased them a couple of years ago with our iPad deployment so that our students can physically write on devices. So one of the things that my students, some of them really love writing with their crayons, some of them hate doing that. So instead of making that a requirement, they have the option of using notes with the Logitech crayon, or they'll create a doc and submit that objective summary. Once they're done, they're going to put a check mark in the box. The next assignment is analyze. One of the big things that we go over is figuring out the difference between the character traits and the character's actions versus the character's feelings, and how their feelings and actions change throughout a text. So for this assignment, they're going to analyze the character's actions, explain the character's feelings in the chapter, and infer why they're having these feelings. Now, that's one of the big words that it's on. I have a chart in my classroom called the power words, and these are words that the students are exposed to for testing. So analyze is also one of them, and infer is one of those words that the kids are going to have to figure out what those mean and master that before test season comes along. So that's where they're going to practice with this. For this assignment, they're going to create a chart. They can create their chart on Google Docs. For this one specifically, there is a template. It's not attached here because I haven't really wrapped my head around how I want them to do the chart. There's a few different templates I have in mind, but this choice board, I'm actually going to start with my students next month. So I have a little bit of time to figure out exactly what chart I want them to do based on how they have mastered the concept moving forward. It's actually a concept that I'm teaching next week. And then the last one is a prediction. What do you think will happen next? Now, my students have a difficult time coming up with what they think is going to happen next. And one of the big topics that we talk about is um, if you read very carefully what the author has written, you can figure out what they're going to say next, what could happen, what logically could happen. If the character is talking about, let's say, there's a storm coming and they're very worried about their animals in the text, the next thing that's going to happen probably isn't that a dinosaur comes and eats everybody. Those are some of the things that a lot of my students are still struggling with. So figuring out something that is concrete and realistic that could happen next. The majority of the texts that they're reading for novel studies or even book clubs are realistic fiction. With that being said, what are some real things that could occur in life? This response, they have the option of producing something that is on paper or in docs. And for this, the response must be 6 sentences long. Everything in the writing section is independent. I want my students to start getting in that mindset of, hey, I'm not going to be able to rely on everybody all the time to get my point across. But all of these also dive into that critical thinking. The answers are not just simply put out there, especially for the analyze and the prediction section. They have to actually, after reading, think about everything that they read. They have to go back in the text and then use what they read to make a prediction or analyze what's actually happening. I really like these two activities because I want to see what they can do, how they are thinking about something. And that also opens up for the next two columns. They're able to communicate with their groups. They're able to talk about, hey, this is what I saw happening with this character. Let's say the book we're reading right now is Fish in a Tree. The main character is Allie. I'm seeing that Allie is feeling very upset after this interaction. Well, now they can have a very real conversation with the people in their groups. In the next column, the assignments are the first one is the collaboration. Um, Actually, all three of them are collaborations. And the first one is a podcast. And the students are going to create a podcast with their group. So everybody in the group has to participate in this. And all of this will be explained to the students. This is how they're going to present this product. Everybody has to participate in some way, shape, or form. This is where they can talk about and put their thoughts and feelings versus an objective summary where they have to omit that. That's one of the big things that we talk about when we do our objective summary. We have to omit our personal thoughts and feelings. But in this podcast, they get to do that. So the point of the podcast is to create with their group. In the podcast, it's really kind of a summary that I'm expecting them to do, but they're going to walk me through what they're feeling and what they were thinking when they were reading different parts of the text. This they're going to record. They're going to choose one person's device and they're going to record on that device using the Voice Memos app. The minimum requirement for length of time should be no shorter than 4 minutes long for this. The next assignment is a character interview. For this, the students are going to think about what happens to the character. Think about not only this chapter, but maybe the chapter before. What are some things that happen? They're going to come up with a list of questions. And with their partners, they're going to conduct an interview. And for this, they're going to use the Clips app. And the interview for this must be at least 90 seconds long. And they need to explain what happened in some way, shape, or form in the text, ask questions, and go from there. In the last assignment for the collaboration section is the act it out. With the group, the students are going to create a short skit of the chapter. One of the big things that my students really struggle with, especially when they're in their reading and their writing, is they struggle coming up with dialogue or even recognizing dialogue. Dialogue is such a crucial part of a text, and it actually gives a lot of information, and my students very, very easily overlook all of that. Um, but with this, I want my students to think about the characters and how they're interacting, and then act some of those moments out. For this, their final assignment that they're going to be submitting will either be on Flip, which can record up to 10 minutes, or iMovie, where I wouldn't want them to record something longer than 10 minutes. So I would have to explain that a little bit more in depth to the kids. But with this, they're going over um, all of the different parts of what happens in the text. They're using what's happening. They can even add more dialogue if necessary to get the point across, because the narrators most of the time explain a lot more of the text than the characters actually discuss. So they're going to have to talk with each other. They're going to have to be a little more creative with this specific assignment in this column. This really merges, in my opinion, it really merges collaboration and creativity to bring this assignment to the next level. And then in our last column, the create column, which is where I'm letting my students have all of this create their creativity and just letting it run wild. They can create a storyboard detailing the events of the chapter. For this, whenever I have my students do storyboards, I require them to have dialogue in each of their panels. Um, a lot of times, my students will make brilliant designs in each panel, but there's no dialogue, so I don't know what's happening. And I explain to them, hey, you need to learn how to explain what you're seeing, what you're showing people, because a picture holds 1,000 words, but you really want the person looking at this picture to know exactly what you're trying to say. In this, there is actually a link to this example, which shows an example of fish in a tree. There are 3 specific scenes that are occurring here, and in each one, there are different speech bubbles, and the characters are talking. You can see that all the characters are they have different emotions in all of the scenes. The next one for the create section is to create a quiz. The students can create a quiz on Blooket or quizzes. Both my students love both Blooket and quizzes, so I would see most of them doing one of those. But I also threw in Google Forms because the students also, some of them like to make Google Forms, so they can do that. This now, the point of this assignment is for other students to have the ability to take the quiz. Um, for this, there's not really that much collaboration, but they have to critically think, because I explained to the kids, when you make a quiz, you don't want the answers to be so obvious. You want somebody to have to think about what happened, but you want the answers to be in the text. They have to be there in black and white. So you have to use your words and ask your questions in a creative way. For this, the quiz must have at least 5 questions. And then the last assignment is actually my favorite assignment of all of the assignments, and it's an advice column. Basically, the students are going to, after reading the text, one of the characters in the novel needs advice on something that's happening. And they wrote into the local newspaper's advice column. Their job for this is 2 things. They're going to create a letter describing why the character needs advice, and then they're going to create a response to that, giving response to the original letter to give them advice. It's kind of like an Ask Abby kind of thing. And I created an example for that, which is linked in the assignment. It's Ask Miss Toledo. And this is the Maxon News, and here is the Dear Miss Toledo, ask Miss Toledo anything. And I created this basically using the cat in the hat. One of the things that I like to do a lot of my writing examples specifically is use a lot of very common texts. And one of the common texts that we use is cat in the hat. I like to use green eggs and ham, but for this one, it's cat in the hat. So it's Dear Miss Toledo, my mom recently left my sister and me home alone. Before she left, she told us not to open the door for anyone, but when she left, a nice man came to play. My pet fish reminded me that we could not have company, but he's already in the house. What should we do? So then here's my advice back to this response. Hello, bored and confused. If your mom gives you an instruction, I think you should listen to her. She loves you and is trying to keep you safe, yada, yada, yada. It has everything in it, and it's a response to the question. So that's what they're going to have to do. Now, for this one, I give them two templates. The templates are a little bit different than the assignment because the assignment that I created was on Google Docs. Both of these are actually Google Slides. So they'll be completing their final on either the Falcon News, where they can add their information, add a picture if they would like, or they can use the Maxon newspaper and go from there. They would change these two columns and add a picture down there. And finally, they're going to rate their week at the end of the week to show how their week was in terms of completion of work, the assignments, and how well they understood the text. And that's really it. This um, this choice board I actually created so that it's accessible for all of my learners. I have a student who's visually impaired, and the colors would throw their device off. It would be very difficult to navigate this storyboard independently, but I want to make sure that it's also engaging for all of my other students who who are not visually impaired. So this is the regular choice board, and then this is the same choice board for my students with visual impairments. Again, I really love doing choice boards so that my students are thinking outside the box, so that they're working with other people for the assignments they need to be working on. But there's also the component in here where they're just communicating on what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. One thing a lot of my students have, they struggle with communication and have diagnosed communication disabilities. And even just talking about, hey, let's read this together aloud. That is something that's very big for my learners. So doing something like this, I wouldn't be able to start in the beginning of the year or even the beginning of our novel study unit. But this is something that as our novels go on, and as the year goes on, this is something that I can easily take and my students can work on independently. So the novel study for the first marking period and the middle of the second marking period is really I'm giving over the keys to the kingdom, and then that's where this choice board comes in. The next novel where they're going to be starting in January, it's a very short novel study, but they can do all of these activities then. This could also be modified and added to my book club, the book club units that we do throughout the year. So there are 2 novels that we do and then 2 book clubs. So that is basically it. All of the assignments. Oh, the one other thing I forgot to show, the objective summary. That is actually also linked in here. And this is something the students have access to once we get started with this. Here is what it looks like. This is the digital summary sentence starter. So I always want them to start within the text, the article, the poem, the novel, and then tell me the title of the text by who's the author. And that's when they have to do all of those things first before they can start their paragraph. And then here's the example for this. Chapter 1 of Henry and Mudge in Puddle Trouble by Cynthia Rylant. And it goes on to give the summary of the story. The one thing that I have to explain to my students is to make sure that they are only adding the most important details from this section of the text. There are a lot of details in there that are not that important, and they have to figure out what is important versus what's not so important, but still important for the development of the story. And that's basically it. This is my novel study choice board. Thank you for watching.